Please welcome Keith Grossman, President of Time, Rajamannar, CMO and CCO, Mastercard, and Francis X. Suarez, Mayor of Miami. Thank you.
Keith, come sit next to us.
What did I? Oh, I'll go right in the middle. Yeah. So, Raja, can you hear us?
Yes, I can, Keith.
Oh,
good morning.
Perfect. I was going to sit to the far right. I have to admit, I'm very good friends with the mayor, and I hate sitting next to him because it makes me feel so ugly. But Raja, thank you for joining us. I know you're feeling under the weather
Why
today.
do you think Raj didn't come?
I know,
just
right?
kidding.
No, but seriously, Raj has been feeling under the weather, but are you feeling okay? I know that.
Yeah, slowly getting back. It's a little bit of a trip. COVID has been pretty nasty.
So, well, it's wonderful to have you here. My name's Keith Grossman. I am the president of Time, and I'm honored to be joined today by Mayor Suarez of Miami, Avery, Akkineni of Vayner3, and Rajamannar of Mastercard. I will admit, I am very good friends with all three of them. This is not my first time meeting them, and I'm totally biased in talking to all of them because I like them all tremendously. We, at Time, entered into Web3 2 years ago, and when I took us into Web3 and I made this announcement, everyone in the media asked me the exact same thing. That was my friend. They said, are you crazy? Are you on drugs? What is wrong with you? And what I saw, though, was an evolution in consumer behavior from online rentership to online ownership. And I saw privacy shifting from platforms to individuals. And I saw a technology that allowed for online ownership. And we kept our head down, and we just kept on building. And it became public because everything you do on the blockchain is public. And in 12 months, we did $17 million in top-line gross revenue and $10 million in profit. And at that point, people started to realize, wow, this is a real business. And I love being joined by Mayor Suarez and Raja because we just, together with Salesforce, announced a partnership to bring Miami into Web3 as the first municipality ever. But I also love being joined by Avery because she's been leading the conversation with brands like Pepsi and Budweiser and others and bringing them into Web3. And so I actually am going to throw it over to you first, Avery. As you have been growing Vayner3, right? What has been getting you excited about this new environment that's emerging?
Yeah, it's a great question, Keith, and thank you for having me. First, I'll share a little bit of what Vayner3 is. So Vayner3 is a dedicated Web3 consultancy. And we started this sort of out of our core business, which is called Vayner3, founded by Gary Vaynerchuk, because we observed everything that you were seeing in terms of the early days of Web3. And on top of that, we saw there was this really dedicated subculture that was building and capturing consumer attention. Our firm has existed for over a decade, and we've done everything from helping brands figure out their first Facebook pages and websites to e-com. And my boss, Gary V, was like, hey, I think there's something happening here with these crypto punks. And when he first brought this up in late 2020, early 2021, I thought he was crazy that someone would pay $18,000 for a pixelated image. But then I started looking into what was really happening in this idea of ownership and digital self-expression, all being available on a public ledger. And I got really interested in this and the potential of how this was going to shift consumer behavior dramatically over the coming years. Couple that with the amount of time individuals spend on screens. The internet is only getting bigger. Time spent digitally is going up, up, up. And we were fascinated by this. So shortly after the launch of the VFriends project, which really helped us get our hands on how all of this stuff actually works, a lot of our partners who are Fortune 500 companies, including we're fortunate to work with amazing folks like Raja, they started also being interested in what we were doing and having conversations with us about this. And then we started working with these companies on crafting their strategies for Web3. And what gets me excited is we're still so early to this game. We're only like 18 months, 24 months into this, and we've made such tremendous progress already. It's gone from people asking you if you're crazy to companies like Salesforce and Spotify, Shopify, and many, many others really investing this as a core piece of infrastructure, and folks like Mayor Suarez and Raja taking the time out of their incredibly busy schedules to talk about why this is a tremendous movement.
So I love that. And, to give you an idea and to give you some real stats, I love that in the previous conversation, you showed the 15 years of Zeta, right? And what was happening in 2007. I actually went back. I started my career at Wired. And I went back and I looked at the Fortune 100 in 1992, which is when I would say Web 1 started, right? And to give you a few definitions, when I say Web 3, I mean crypto, DeFi, NFTs, and the metaverse. When I say Web 1, I mean a read-write web. When I say Web 2, I mean a read-write social web. And Web 3 is a read-write social ownership web, right? So I looked at Web 1. It's 1992. I looked at the Fortune 100. I did this manually myself, right? And I said, okay, what did the Fortune 100 look like 10 years after Web 1? And what I found was 75% of the companies no longer existed on the Fortune 100 10 years later, right? But of the 25% that existed, 85% were actually lower than where they were a decade earlier. And then I went, okay, well, what about Web 2? And I love that you chose 2007 as the year that you founded, because I think 2007 is the year that we would all agree is when Web 2 really was birthed. And I said, okay, who's the list? And let's go 10 years out. And what I found was the same stat held true. 75% of the companies that were on the Fortune 100 in 2007 were not on the Fortune 100 10 years later, right? And of the 25% that were, the 85% roughly actually went up. So they learned from what was happening. And so here we are, and we are essentially 2 years into Web3, I would argue. And the question is in 8 years from now, what type of company will you be, right? This is an extraordinarily disruptive moment. It's a shift from online rentership to ownership. It's a shift from privacy. And what I love about that is that in Web 1 and Web 2, you saw the rise of Silicon Valley. But all of a sudden, Web 3 emerges, and you see a new sort of player in town. And it's kind of your fault. And so, I mean, I've said this, people will call you the Bitcoin mayor, but I actually think you're more of a larger innovative mayor. Will you just, before we jump into some of the things that you're working on today, but will you step back and say, what was the aha moment where you realized, whoa, I could make Miami the hub of Web3?
I think there were multiple. I think it started, we're talking about this upstairs. I'm a finance, sort of studied finance in college. My dad's an engineer. So we certainly have a sort of a mathematical background. And when I started looking into Bitcoin and understanding how the blockchain facilitated Bitcoin, I was fascinated by the real world applications of what Bitcoin could do at scale, at the macro level. And I saw a stat, I love those stats, by the way, I'm gonna use those, the ones that you just cited. I saw a stat that I found fascinating. Even at the current price of Bitcoin, which people are constantly reminding me of, the market cap puts it as the 25th most valuable currency in the world. Okay, when it was at its high, at an over $1 trillion valuation, it was within the top 10. Okay, so this is a fairly new concept, right? That emerged and at one point was, in the top 10 most valuable currencies in the world. Okay, not owned by anyone, not manipulatable by anyone, which is another thing that I find fascinating about the technology and about the idea. That was one, and then the second one is I have two young children, an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old, and my 4-year-old, who was 2 at the time, a couple years ago. I saw her one day on her bed, and she was taking a selfie with her pacifier. And I thought to myself, oh my God, there's no turning back, And to your point, when you analyze, we are already in the metaverse. We are. Just go on if you have an Apple, an Android, or whatever, go on your phone and find out how much time you're looking at it. You are spending, 30, 40, 50, 60% of the time engage with your phone at some level. your kids are spending 25, 35% more time than you, right? So we are already heading in that direction. When you look at some of the real world applications of things like virtual reality, we're talking about offline, it is transformational. And so for me, on December 4th of 2020, since you asked me a specific question, it was a specific moment, right, where somebody put out a tweet, Delian Asparov from the Founders Fund put out a tweet that said, hey guys, what if we move Silicon Valley to Miami? And I responded very innocently, how can I help? And I had no idea it was gonna go viral. I knew it was sort of a counter trend to what was happening in urban cities in America, where they were pushing out innovators, famously here in New York. Amazon, after the HQ2 prize, was sort of told no thank you. And then in San Francisco, Elon was, was a tweet that said, F Elon Musk, and he replied, message received, and left, right? So there was sort of this anti-innovation attitude from cities, and we want it to be fundamentally different because I think we are fundamentally different, and that's a longer story. But I think that began this process, and every time I talked about Web 3.0 or crypto, the analytics in my social media would just go bonkers, ballistic. And I thought to myself, wow, this is a really, really incredible opportunity. And when I talk to people who don't understand crypto, I was doing a Fox Business interview with Stuart Varney recently. He said, Mr. Mayor, and by the way, I cannot get his British accent right. I just don't understand this crypto thing. And I said, Stuart, let me explain it to you very quickly in a way that you can understand, okay? We have the Bitcoin conference, the largest crypto conference in the world, 50,000 attendees, tens of millions of dollars in economic development. Do you understand that? Tens of millions of dollars? Oh yes, I understand that. I go, this company FTX spent $200 million naming our arena. Do you understand that? He goes, oh yeah, I understand 200 million. And I said, and then you have companies like blockchain.com and eToro that are locating their headquarters, creating tens, if not hundreds, of $100,000 jobs. Do you get that? He goes, yeah, I get that. I go, so it's an ecosystem play as well as it is a technology play and innovation play.
I just love that. And you said that the other day on stage, and when we were chatting, and I wanted to make sure that we hit on that point home again. David, I got to tell you, I'm amazed that you have over 7,000 people live streaming this today. It's amazing and a huge testament. Thank you.
And can I just jump back in? I just want to say real quick that I just want everyone here to pray for the people of the Gulf Coast of Florida that were hit with a devastating, I'm only here because we're very lucky and very fortunate that it did not directly hit the city of Miami, but we have a tremendous amount of resources that we're deploying as we speak to help the people who have been devastated by this storm. And anything that you can do beyond prayers, because prayers are great, but anything you can do beyond prayers, if you can find organizations that are supporting the effort of rescue and search and obviously rebuilding, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, Eastern Florida has just been decimated.
It's apocalyptic.
Oh. Raja, I'm sorry that you have to follow up on that. Maybe I could like give some sort of segue. Like can I blame France again, David? Yes. Okay, France, right? Right? No. So Raja, oftentimes when I talk about the adoption of Web3, and Avery said it really beautifully, where it's like it is early, right, in everything. I often point to 4 real factors that are prohibiting mass adoption. I think that the foundation is there for real growth and real business, and we're seeing that in places like Miami and in New York, and I know you don't like when I reference other cities, and others. But it really comes down to the front end, right? Like the consumer experience is terrible, right? Like my mother, and I always give this example, is never going to, call me up and say, connect me to a Coinbase account, like transfer fiat to it. Like she's never gonna even use that word. She's never gonna say, convert it to Ethereum. She's not gonna care. She's never gonna let it sit for 7 days and then get a MetaMask account. Like she wants that experience that she had when she called me up today and she said, like, Keith, put me on the Twitter, right? And I got her on Twitter in like 10 seconds. And I'm like, it's just not the Twitter, it's Twitter. But she just wants that, right? And obviously there are other areas. The experience has to transcend the technology. Like we shouldn't even be saying words like NFT, that should disappear. Regulation needs to take place, which is important for clarity from the consumer perspective, and education. But like there's no one sitting at the front end more clearly than a brand like Mastercard. And and you've been really leaning into Web3, and I just wanted to ask you, from your perspective as the global CMO of Mastercard and also the president of Mastercard Health, like, what is it that you see from your perspective that says, like, I want to make sure that I'm leading in this evolution?
So first thing, Keith, from my perspective, I'm getting an echo. I hope you're able to hear me clearly.
We can.
Thank you. So a couple of things. Firstly, when you look at areas like cryptocurrencies, there are different versions of them, whether it is stable coins, where people have more level of comfort and confidence, and they're backed by some kind of a fiat currency or some kind of a linkage, or you got the free floating currencies like the Bitcoins of the world. They have got different trajectories, and I don't think anyone can exactly predict how things will go, but there is no ignoring the fact that they are here to stay, and I completely agree with the mayor of Miami. Second, when you look at something like NFT, it's a concept which is not very easy to understand. And even if you understand the concept and you want to play with it, your point is absolutely right. The consumer experience is absolutely awful. Now, I minted my own, NFT, taking the cover off my book. And it was such a horrible process. It was totally broken. You know, one of the things which we did very quickly is we, as company Mastercard, we connected with Coinbase, and we had actually announced a joint initiative where you don't have to go through those hoops to be able to simply buy an NFT, mint an NFT, or keep an NFT, or sell it. So that's something which we are actually focused on to simplify the experience. And once that happens, NFT has got very significant value, not just only from the art point of view. There can be other kinds of tokenized or digitized assets. Like, for example, they call it soul-bound tokens. So something which I have got a certificate, which has to be uniquely bound to me, my driver's license. And so those are the kind of things which will get into leveraging the underlying technology. Blockchain is very much here to stay. And in fact, I believe that we are one of the largest filers of patent applications for blockchains as a company. So area by area. Now, I'll just come to one single point, which is on Metaverse. Now, Metaverse, the experience is pretty clunky. And like John Scully was mentioning before, wearing that heavy headset, it does get a little tedious after some time. But even with that, we said we want to really test the waters. So we created experiences across multiple Metaverse platforms, whether it is Roblox or Sandbox, or we have gone into Decentraland. We created, for example, Pride Parade in Decentraland. And then we have created Grammy experience in Roblox. So typically when you do a standard, experience that we give to consumers, we call them priceless experiences at one of our assets like Grammy Awards. So this year for Grammy Awards, normally what we do, we invite some guests, a limited number, 200, 300, whatever. They walk the red carpet, they take their selfies in front of the step and repeat. They get the best seats at the concert, go backstage after, take selfies with our brand ambassadors, and that becomes their memorabilia, so to speak, and then they go back home happily. So we said, how can we scale it using Metaverse? We recreated the entire experience in Metaverse, where we said that you create your avatar, you buy items and accessories to dress up and deck up your avatar, walk virtually on the red carpet, take the selfie in front of step and repeat, have multiple views of the concert, because now you're not fixed to one seat. You can just switch your camera and things like that. Go backstage and take selfies with the avatars of the brand ambassadors of Mastercard. And all these selfies come to you as NFTs. By doing this, it cost us just a little bit of incremental amount to normally what we spend, but the reach has suddenly exploded and it became borderless. So we had people from India and Australia and Brazil all experiencing the Grammy experience that we give, but in the Metaverse, and the reactions were fantastic. So we know that there is going to be a lot of opportunity out here, whether it is commerce that's going to happen in the Metaverse, which is it's a big area of priority for us, obviously. Curating experiences across different categories. This is a field that is really going to take off. Whether it is going to happen 3 years, 5 years, I'll not go into the prediction of it, but we want to be ready and we want to help shape some of the destiny as we are looking forward. So I'm personally very excited, and Mastercard is very excited about these areas. We have even launched, for example, cards which actually have multi currencies, including cryptocurrencies. We have just announced last week a card where you can print your NFT on top of the face of the card. And as a souvenir, if you have a Bored Ape or whatever, you actually have a physical representation of that on the card. So that's your card design, highly personalized or hyper-personalized, as you call it. So we're doing a ton of things. Some of these will be successful. Some of these will probably not succeed. That's okay. We would have learned something. And that's the whole objective at this point in time.
I mean, I just want to reiterate, like what you just heard was from the global CMO of Mastercard. This is not like a small test and repeat like type of experiment, but it's amazing to see what you've been doing. I want to actually dive into something that you talked about in terms of the scalability of metaversal experiences, right? So first, there's not a metaverse. There are many metaverses, right? And so there's not a singular, which I think is important that people realize that. I'll give you a real personal example, but you and I were just talking about an amazing one that I want to go into very quickly. Before COVID, at Time, we partnered with Martin Luther King Estate, and we rebuilt the 1965 I Have a Dream experience with the King Estate, and we actually crossed the uncanny valley in terms of the most photorealistic depiction of a human being ever in VR. And it was amazing. It was the cover of Time. Okay, people did not realize that this was not a real image. It was fully computer generated. It was the cover of Time. That launched in February 2020 at the DuSable Museum in Chicago. And then March 2020 happened, and we all know the world ended. And this amazing partnership that we had done, this incredible build that we had done, could be experienced by nobody, okay? And so we actually partnered with Fortnite and recreated the experience in Fortnite, okay? A metaverse you would never expect educational material in. And 14 million people showed up and spent an average of 49 minutes in the experience engaging with education. And so if you don't think that this is real, you're wrong. But like also, right, if you don't think this is real, just look at your children if you have one, or look at any 8-year-old who's on Roblox. That is a metaverse. And if you want to think about sort of how that's going to adopt over time, just think about, why is everything gamified today in your life? It's gamified because we all grew up with Nintendos and Segas and Ataris, and so they're just feeding into the behavior that we learned over time. But you, Mr. Mayor, were just talking about education and VR. Will you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, and you also hit a nerve with my 8-year-old on Roadblocks. I'm like, what's the purpose? He's like, there is no purpose. I'm like, but then why do you do it? He goes, well, so I want to build things. I was like, why do you keep spending my money? He goes, because I need it to build
Like
things.
George Costanza,
Yeah.
why is it on TV?
Right, exactly.
Why would I watch it? Because it's on TV.
Raj, by the way, I give you an 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 room rater.
Your room rating?
Yeah, because you got books on one side, you got your awards on the other side. You've written one of the books.
Quantum
Right.
Quantum marketing is
Sure,
Raj's book.
sure.
just so
He
you
wrote.
know.
That's what I'm saying. You wrote one of the
By the
books,
way,
so
I
that
wrote
gives you
the
extra bonus point right there.
I wrote the quote on the back, and then he booted me off the back.
Wow.
Right?
You got deleted. You got deleted. And I got to tell you, you got deleted. I got to tell you a real quick story. So my son is a Boy Scout, and I go to the Boy Scouts, and I don't know if I ever told you this story. And one of your competitors, who I will not name, but the
I told him.
Oh, you did tell him? But the name is 4 letters, right? And this guy comes running at me like breathlessly, and he's like, Mr. Mayor, I work for that company. And I said,
The company is like, I came from Ibiza.
yeah, exactly. and he goes, we want to work with you. We want to work with you. And I said, well, I'm doing all these incredibly innovative things with Mastercard. They are really on the precipice of sort of the vanguard of technology. And for a big company, it's just incredible how I'm telling him all this stuff. He goes, we know. So you guys are rattling your competitors. But on the question, I was recently, there are moments in time in life when you experience something and you instantly know your life is going to change and the world is just different. So I was I was giving a speech, and I finished a speech, and I was brought to some like booth, and I put on this virtual reality goggles for a company that does charter schools in the metaverse or in virtual reality. And I put this on, and I was transported to this incredible campus. And I'll tell you, I've traveled the world, and I've only seen campuses like this in 1 or 2 places in my life, in the real world. And they cost billions and billions of dollars to create, and basically are being done by countries that, that basically are pumping oil, essentially, right? Where money is not really an obstacle. But if you want to scale and you want to provide this level of education and this experience to people and children in the inner city, which we should all strive for, right? We should all strive to the best equalizing and democratizing force in our world is education. And we should hope and pray and work to make it possible for every child in our communities to be able to experience a premium education so they can compete in a modern day world. And this technology is creating this pathway with a couple $100 that as clunky as it is, John, as sort of 1.0 as it is, it still gives you an ability. And the VR, to your point, Keith, about the pixelization of Martin Luther King, it's become so good. It's like an order of magnitude good from the last time I tried it, because we forget how fast the world is being disrupted. Last time I tried it was probably a year prior, and all of a sudden I put these things on, I'm like, whoa, this is serious. And you just know right away, you take those things off and you know right away, this is never gonna be the same. And I think that's where we're at. Certainly, to John's point, I do think we're gonna get to a point where we're wearing glasses or something, far less cumbersome than these goggles. But it was evident to me that we are not gonna go back.
So, Avery, I want to go to you for a second because, the attendees here are an amazing group of individuals that vary. I mean, John Scully, you have Punasha, the head of Seva Love, which is part of the Chopra Institute. I mean, I could see it in the room, but there's also 7,000 plus people watching, a live stream. And Web3 is amazing and exciting. And to be honest, like what we have found is anyone who touches it never wants to go back. And like I have a mug that says, "Be careful," may start talking about Bitcoin and never shut up, right? And that's how I feel about Web3. Like I feel like I'm this crazy person on the hilltop screaming like this is the most amazing thing you've ever seen. But you have to deal with it every day with the clients that you have at Vayner3 and whatnot. And so if you were to give as the closing words, like one bit of advice on like what would be the first step to take to like enter into this journey, what would you suggest?
Yeah, well, one thing that I would suggest is really each of you taking the time to get hands-on. Have that Mayor Suarez moment where it changes your mind and your perspective. And I think for every individual person, something different might resonate. It might be an educational experience you see in the metaverse. It might be a Fortnite concert or game where you're like, wow, this is amazing. Might be playing around in Roblox with your kids or playing around in Horizon Worlds. Facebook's pouring billions of dollars into this ecosystem to develop something. It might be setting up your crypto wallet and getting your first Coinbase, right? But one thing I always encourage the partners that we work with is to put yourself in the shoes of the consumers who are experiencing this revolution in technology, whether it's across the financial side, the metaverse side, or even the cultural side of it. I think that's my top recommendation is to really don't be that sample size of one of, hey, I'm not into crypto, I think that stuff's a scam. Really take the time to understand why there's such a dedicated community of these early adopters. The Keith standing on the hill telling people like you all who are, shaping the next iteration of this at your own companies, why this is so important. So start by starting and get yourself personally involved. I think that will really shape the perspective that you can bring to your organizations on how this might be applicable for you all. It doesn't have to be tomorrow, but in the future.
And if I can just say one thing, look to the Keith Grossmans of the world, right, who took a legacy company that you would not think is known for innovation per se and monetized Web 3.0 for that company. And so that's a real world practical application and practical benefit for the company, which is why he's such a superstar in our country.
So true.
So I don't want to end on me. I will end on thanking the three of you. Avery, thank you so much as always. You're amazing, and the work you're doing over at Vayner3 is amazing. Raja, I know you were under the weather, and I appreciate you making the time. And if you haven't, Raja's book behind him, Quantum Marketing, is an excellent book that even though I've not publicly endorsed, I've privately endorsed. Mayor Suarez, thank you so much. I mean, thankfully, Miami was spared, but, our thoughts and prayers to those in Florida that were hit by the hurricane. And the fact that you're here today is beyond appreciated by everyone. So thank you.
Can I just say that this is one of the best panels I've ever been on? And this could
I
have,
said that last time.
I know, but it's true. And
It
this
just
could have
gets better and
this
better.
could have easily gone twice or three times as long, and we would have filled it with a lot of great content.
David said we couldn't. He yelled at me.
Happy to be here.
France. Anyway, thank you all so much.